With another exciting UFC 273 card in the books, we have a very special guest joining us to break down some of the craziness that went down, from her amazing work on UFC on ESPN, of course, her analyst and reporter, and her commentary work on the Dana White Contender Series, her quick hits interviews that are some of my favorite aspects of the events. She just did a really good one with Alex Volkanovski just before she joined us here today. Laura Sanko, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was honored when I know Alex is on a card and you guys ask me to be in the post fight. That is an extra big honor because I know what a special fighter he is for you and your audience. So thanks for having me on.
No, of course. We couldn't pick anybody better than you, Laura. So really appreciate you jumping on with us. Let's be honest. We will talk about Alex, but this is like the Khamzat post-fight show. This is what everybody is tuning in for. We'll get straight into it. I mean, what did you think of Khamzat's performance and how would you grade his win, which to me felt like a main event? We learned so much and we'll get into that, but how would you grade the performance as he beat Gilbert Burns in arguably a Fight of the Year contender?
I thought he had an excellent performance. And I think it's funny that you're seeing a lot of chatter online of like, oh, this is what you get when you talk a big game and can't back it up. Like, what do you mean you can't back it up?
Number 11 to number 2. Number 11, number 2. What do people expect?
Exactly. You just beat the number 2 guy in the division. And of course, there's going to be moments for us to point out and say, hey, you should have done that better. And there definitely were. There was a few moments where I think his greenness showed through a little bit. But that's reality, right? We forget that he's only been doing MMA for what, like 6 years, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not even talking about his UFC run. Like, the man has only been doing MMA for 6 years. So of course you're going to see little glimpses of, perhaps, oh, we could have made a better decision there, whatever the case may be. But overall, he just beat the guy who almost beat the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the UFC. So I feel like that was a pretty damn good performance in my books.
Oh, man. And I think it's one of those situations as well where the entrance was just so epic. Everyone was so hyped. Then he's sitting up on top of the octagon, just waiting for Gilbert Burns. And you're like, is this, like, I feel like I'm watching WCW in 1998. Like, is Sting going to come down from the rafters? Like, what is, it's a vibe, right? Laura, like, you must have been there and felt it in person.
Talk about a vibe. I've never seen that before. I don't think anybody's ever seen that before. I don't think anybody's ever thought to do that before. And I always talk about when he picked up the leech and he brought him over to Dana. Like, we've seen people pick up their opponents before, but they usually bring them to their corner. Never had we seen someone bring Dana a sacrifice like he did with Leech. And I feel like this was another moment where you're just like, holy shit, this guy is on another level in terms of just his confidence and, just perched up there like a falcon ready to, pounce on his prey. That was crazy. And then of course the commissioner ripped him down and ruined his moment. But
I know, what a bastard. But there was even like a mini moment where he was dragging Gilbert Burns like across the canvas, I think early in the first round. But what were the biggest takeaways for you about Khamzat? Obviously we've been, like, he himself admitted it. This is what he's been wanting for so long. He wanted a challenge. He wanted to be taken into those deep waters. And people talk about how, sometimes it's the losses that teach you the most. This wasn't a loss, but he had to go through that adversity, and I think part of it was humbling for him because he was saying that he'll smash Gilbert in like 1 round, and at the post-fight presser you could see, like, he was asked, do you know sort of the mistakes that you made, and he's like, absolutely, I know them already. He admitted that he came out of the gate a little bit too hard and fast. Maybe not the best comparison, but it reminded me of Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar would come out with those flying knees, but you could see that kind of inexperience and almost the, not jitters, but the overzealousness. And I think maybe in the next fight, Khamzat will be a little bit more careful and measured. We learned that he has an insane chin on him. We learned that he's got insane heart. He did gas a little bit, but then again, he put on a crazy pace. What for you were like the biggest things that were like, okay, now we know this about Khamzat?
I think we learned a lot about Khamzat tonight. We had no idea what he was going to do in the face of adversity. And I think now we know he absolutely has whatever heart is necessary to withstand those difficult situations, to get cracked. I mean, not just cracked, but like sat down by some heavy shots. and then not allow that not only to deter you mentally, but I think sometimes we forget how physically taxing it can be to get knocked down. And have that fuzziness, in the brain. It really takes a physical toll. So I don't know. I feel like we checked a lot of boxes. He could take a hit. He's got excellent gas, although not limitless. As though I feel like these tall tales were building before we saw him fight tonight. Like, will he ever be able to gas? Yes, he's human. He's human, right? But he's got a hell of a good gas tank. I was really impressed by his boxing. I mean, there were definitely moments where he was overzealous. He was overextending himself a little bit too much. And you could just see the level of composure in Gilbert Burns in some of those exchanges. But I will say this too, early in that fight, Gilbert Burns was the one who looked, I'm not going to say nervous. That's not at all the right word. He had this anxious energy about him. He was
had it entering the arena. I don't know if you saw that video where he was controlling his breathing, walking to the arena. I was saying to some of the other guys, I've never seen a fighter doing that just while walking in.
Exactly. I mean, that was a side of Gilbert Burns that I don't think we've ever seen before, and that speaks to what Khamzat brings to the cage in addition to the physical tools. His presence, his aura, his energy. And I don't think that was diminished tonight, because I think what's going to happen is we're all going to sit around and say, oh, he could have done this better, he could have done this better. And he's doing the exact same thing. And we're all going to sit here and realize, oh my gosh, he's going to come back even better than we knew he was coming into this fight. But I was very impressed by his fluidity and his stance switches. He's clearly got power from both sides, got pretty good defense from both sides. We knew he had tremendous grappling, but seeing him in some of those scrambles, seeing him stuff the takedowns of, of Gilbert Burns as well, we learned a lot about Khamzat Chimaev tonight, and I would call 99% of it really, really good. And the 1% that wasn't good, I have a feeling he's going to go back and fix, and we're going to see an even more improved Khamzat next time out.
And a shout out to Gilbert Burns, who took this huge risk by fighting Khamzat, something not many people would want to do, and did it before people got a chance to see this footage of Khamzat doing 3 rounds. And actually, that must be, and I understand that nervousness that he had at the start, because he was there going like, well, what have I gotten myself into? Like, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. Like, let me suss this out. Let me feel this power. Let me see this movement. Let me see how I can insert myself. So congrats to him for putting on an absolute banger of a fight, and obviously still one of the best in the division. Have to ask you though, Laura, I know Dana White's mentioned Covington and Khamzat next. If you're thinking about it right now, early on, who do you think is the favorite in that matchup?
Oh, in terms of where the odds will be going into it, or who do I favor in that matchup?
Yeah, who's the favorite in your heart?
In my heart, oh my goodness.
Don't forget, Colby's the one that makes you laugh. Right, Laura?
Do we have to revisit that?
Well, I feel, and I almost
but it went viral. I feel like I have to bring it up, otherwise people are going to bring it up in the comments. I love watching it. I was like, that's going to go viral, and then it did.
I feel like I need to address this, because honestly, I watched that, and the whole time I'm like, oh my God, Dustin Poirier and his wife are going to be so mad at me, and because I wasn't laughing at what he said, like in agreement, like, oh
no,
yeah, that
caught you off guard.
Fail your wife, It's really hard for me, because I know him outside. I don't know him that well, but like I know him off camera. And so when he says stuff like that, that's just so asinine and so over the top, and it's right in my face, I just would be like, okay, okay. And then when he looked me dead in the eye, when I was like, yeah, you look pretty good, I was like, yeah. I just couldn't. I couldn't keep it together. What was funny is after the camera shut off, he just looked at me. He's like, "I got you." I was like,
I think it's like a time and place. When you come on Submission Radio, it's fine to crack jokes and say whatever you want. But then it's like when you're in a very, very professional setting, like when you're interviewing him on the UFC channel, stuff like that. It makes it even funnier when you get away with stuff like that. So I understand you laughing about the situation, not necessarily Dustin or anything.
Yeah. And I wonder, Laura, just like looking back at this matchup between Covington and Khamzat Chimaev, man, that's just thinking about it in my head right now. obviously it's a blockbuster fight. They want to do it on ABC. It's going to be absolutely huge. And it's another one of those Colby Covington fights where you don't need a title involved. Like, this is just massive all on its own. But also the skill set that both of these guys bring in, right? Both incredible wrestlers. So there's the question of how does that go? But then when you look at the striking that Colby Covington had and has improved too, and also the devastation that Khamzat brings into the octagon, like, how do you foresee that fight even playing out when you sort of think about it in your head?
Oh, this is so close in my mind, and I'm sitting here trying to do the analysis quickly before I answer the question. And the answer is I'm just not entirely sure who I give the advantage to in that one. And it might end up being like the first fight between Kamaru and Colby, where neither of them really want to test each other. Actually, I don't know about that. I feel like Khamzat would play the ground game regardless. Khamzat would be shooting regardless. I take that back. I might give Colby the fight, though. I might give Colby a slight edge going into that fight, just based on pure experience. Like I said, we did see moments where Khamzat made some decisions where, given another 5-10 fights under his wing, he probably would have done something different, whether it was wrestling when he could have been striking, or, the opposite of that, striking when he could have been wrestling. Man, that's a tough one. He's so much bigger than Colby, I feel like, though. So much bigger. He's so huge. Absolutely massive out there. I'm giving you such a wishy-washy answer right now. I'm going to blame it on the fact that it's 3:08 and I got for 4:45.
Well, I was gonna say, no, you're doing an incredible job, but also one of the things that just popped into my mind is this would be a 5-round fight as well. And I wonder how much that affects things.
I think the longer it goes, the more it's in Colby's favor.
Because, absolutely goes in Colby's favor, because managing the gas tank is one of the most difficult aspects of fight IQ to develop, I think, because you can't do it in the gym. You think you're doing it in the gym when you're doing your rounds with your training partners, but honestly, truly being able to understand how to manage a 5-round fight just takes time, doing 5-round fights. And although I'm sure Khamzat will work very hard on sort of reining in the emotion and not just going out there and try to take someone's head off from the first bell, that really just take time and experience. So in that case, if it goes into those championship rounds, definitely favors Colby.
And just in general, like matchmaking wise, do you think ideally you would have Khamzat before fighting Usman, and obviously that's not a guarantee, but regardless, you would want him to have another fight beforehand? I feel like, because you could in theory say, all right, he'll just face the winner of Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, assuming that goes through. But I feel like regardless, there's still more things that we need to see. The Colby fight could be beautiful because it would expose him to an even bigger audience. Sometimes fighters are just that one extra win away, even though people feel like they might be ready, and that one win just makes them so much bigger that when that title shot comes around. But I almost feel like whether it's Colby or somebody else, Khamzat still needs another fight. And I think regardless, he wouldn't care either way. You heard him at the post-fight presser, just, I don't give a shit. As long as he gets paid and he can help his family, he's happy. I love when they asked him about what pizza topping he'd have, and he's like, I don't care, brother. Beef, chicken, I smash. He smashes everything.
Why is your impression so dead on? That's so good. That was incredible. You could do cameos as Khamzat.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. That's great. We didn't have so many sponsors on Submission Raider. That would be 100%. But
absolutely.
Is there anything that you saw that you like as far as him versus Usman? Is it fair to say like he's not ready now? But is there anything that you see maybe even posing Usman problems? Maybe 1 or 2 fights away that he can work on.
He's right there. I mean, listen, he has all of the physical tools necessary. You saw how incredibly strong he was in the grappling exchanges. That's not going away. If anything, you're only going to get more efficient in the way that you use your strength and your size. So if he can gain some efficiency, I think really is the key word for him. Learning how to rein in a little bit of the desire to smish, You gotta rein that in just enough to be able to be efficient to manage a 5-round fight. But his counters in the pocket were beautiful. but clearly he's got a couple of defensive holes. He's so offensively minded. He was so out there to take Gilbert Burns' head off, and was so convinced that he was capable of doing it, that when they would get into the pocket and be in those 50-50 exchanges, he wasn't thinking about, I have to also roll out or, keep my hands up or whatever, which is why he got caught the way that he did. So he's got to shore up those defenses because, Kamaru Usman, his defense is on point, his offense is on point. He has the power, he has the range. At this point, it's really difficult to pick apart any part of Kamaru's game. So I do think more time would be necessary before I'd want to see him fight the likes of Kamaru Usman, but not that much more time.
Yeah.
Not that much more time. I really do think that the Colby fight would be the perfect fight to give him that type of experience.
Oh, it'd be incredible. Speaking of smashing, our good friends at Manscaped guarantee a smooth coin purse ups your smashing ability by up to 600%. That's according to our scientists. But also, if you're busy smashing inside or outside the cage, you're gonna have to wash yourself, wash away all those sins. No better than Manscaped's premium products. They've got the premium body wash, which will definitely wash away all those sins. Then you've got the 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner. Nobody has time for one or the other. Combine them both. Then you get out. If you're dry as you want to keep yourself hydrated with the hydrating body spray, splash on some Manscaped deodorant, the premium stuff only, and then you get their lip balm, which is great because you get 3 lip balms in one. And if you have dry, cracked lips, that'll take care of that. And they're giving us a sexy discount with the code submission. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. There's no need to wrap yourself up like the Riddler. Thanks to Manscaped, and 20% off and free shipping with the code word submission. Your life will change forever, and you can wash away those sins and get right back to your smashing ways thanks to Manscaped and the code word submission. And Cass, man, I'll tell you, dude, that fight, Khamzat and Gilbert Burns, going to a decision. I know there's a bunch of very, very happy MyBookie Submission Radio fans that used our code word submission, doubled their first deposit. And if they chose Khamzat winning by decision, are walking away with a few bucks in their pocket. Why not be happy like all those other people? And why not sign up to MyBookie for the next big event with the code word submission today? You can double that first deposit and make some serious cash at the best place to go place your bets, whether it's the NBA, NFL, MMA, boxing, wherever it is. MyBookie is your place for all your betting needs, Cass.
That's right. Imagine if betting on Aljamain Sterling beating Petr Yan. You'd be rich right now. Last thing before we talk about Alex Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie is, of course, if you're watching the fights, you're paying for that premium pay-per-view. You don't want your credit card information or your PayPal information stolen. Protect yourself with NordVPN so that all your details are protected. They stay in your computer, and also your internet service provider cannot see what you're watching on the internet, for all those spicy websites. And no buffering, lowering, no speed throttling, so you can stream and watch anything at the premium speeds. Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, whatever you want. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. Use that code word submission. Go to nordvpn.com/submission and get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus threat protection, which is a new feature that you get for free, plus 1 additional month for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Get on it today. Laura, let's talk about Alex Volkanovski because you guys...
Wait. Can we first talk about your transition to that Manscaped free? Because that was that was a thing of beauty. That was absolutely a thing of beauty. And I just have to say that, do you write those, or do they write them?
They write themselves. They're just
they do write themselves. Never in my mind did I realize that the male anatomy was such a delicate thing. It's too moist, it's too dry, and they make everything necessary to complement it. Sorry, I couldn't.
It's very fragile. We're basically giving products to make up for our overcompensation. You know what I mean? That's basically us helping people.
It's like Dustin Poirier,
Yes.
paid in blood, Laura, paid in blood, paid in full by us for years, and here we are helping people avoid it. And you know who else? You know who else is paid in full? That's Alex Volkanovski. Shit transition, not as good as Casper's, but he put in a good performance. You got to give you a break. You got a newborn. He could put in a good performance against obviously the Korean Zombie. Not just a good performance, a great performance. Just quickly before we talk a little bit about what's next in that interview that you had with him, Laura. Your thoughts on the clinic that was put on by Alex Volkanovski and the toughness the Korean Zombie showed in there. It looked like he was just basically going to fight on no matter what was going to hit him. You can bring a bus in there and hit him. He'll still get back up and keep fighting. Unbelievable.
It's almost a performance that's difficult to have a discussion about or do an interview on, because there's no counterpoint to the point. The fact is that Alex Volkanovski went out there tonight and dominated in every regard that he possibly could, other than getting some sort of first round finish. But there's no shame in that. I mean, we're talking about the Korean Zombie after all. But in terms of his range management, his shot selection, his jab was absolutely nasty. His ability to mix in the takedowns and his signature feints. And I mean, Korean Zombie there was not a moment where he was able to get comfortable in this fight. And it was crazy doing the interview with him, because I'm looking at his face just, a foot away, barely a mark on him. And then you see Korean Zombie, just his face tells the story. It tells you everything that you need to know. And after, I know that it's not the Max fight. And it's almost like, because it wasn't the Max fight, people were almost like disregarding this fight. I'm like, this doesn't really help him, right? This doesn't really push Alex forward. This doesn't do anything for his legacy. That's absolutely not true. We're still talking about the number 4 featherweight in the world, and an absolute legend, and a guy who's very adept in the pocket, a guy who's often makes people look silly in the way that he's able to counter the shots. And Alex went out there and put on a clinic. So, man, I don't know why. He still has just a tinge of being underappreciated by the general fan base. And to me, I think it's not about, he got the finish tonight, right? He got a fantastic finish. That fight had to be stopped. He needed one of those, and he just got it. The only other ding against him, in my mind, and we talked about this on the weigh-in show, I think that there's just a part of the public that loves Max Holloway so much that they're just never going to get behind Alex. At least not anytime in the near future, or at least until Alex beats Max with in an absolute definitive nature. You're just not going to win those fans over, because everyone loves Max Holloway. And that's honestly, it's the only thing that Volkanovski has done wrong, is beat Max Holloway. The man is on a 21 fight win streak and still is missing some of the respect I feel like he's due.
Yeah, 100%. Well, speaking to Luke Thomas, and he made the exact same point. I agree with you 1,000%. I think with Alex, it's tough because he's beaten so many legends, and some of them were sort of decisions. The Max Holloway fights are super, super underappreciated. I think one of the turning points was the Ortega win, because how can you not love Alex, or how can you not respect Alex for being in those bad positions and then, just coming through? So I think things started to turn there, and then now with this Korean Zombie fight, it was a different kind of appreciation where people were kind of like, shit, this guy is actually really far ahead of the division. In a way, it reminded me of Israel Adesanya's win over Paulo Costa, where people were kind of like, okay, yeah, there are definitely levels. And now you're having those similar discussions here. People are even talking about, is it him or is it Usman who are pound for pound? Even the fact that he's so close to Usman on those rankings is another show of respect. I feel like this win was a turning point in of itself. But I know that post-fight, you spoke with him, and he said that he'd love to fight for the lightweight belt at the end of the year in an ideal world. At this point, and of course it depends on who's the champion. If it's, say, Charles Oliveira or Justin Gaethje, it's one thing. If in some way it's Conor McGregor, then it's a different discussion. But at this point, what do you think is bigger, the Max Holloway rematch or Volko fighting for the lightweight belt? Given, the history that him and Max have, and I feel like how much anticipation there would be for them to finally, settle it. All that time of people saying, Max really won, and then Volko wanting to prove it. Which one do you think would be the bigger fight?
I actually think that him moving up to lightweight would be the bigger fight. I really do. And maybe that's just me as a fan feeling like, I'm not saying the fights weren't close. The fights were close, but I do feel like Alex won both of those fights. So sitting in that camp where I do, I'm kind of like him. When you ask him about it, he's never going to say I won't take that fight. Absolutely, he'll fight anyone, anywhere, and that's absolutely true. But the reality is, in his mind, he beat Max Holloway twice. Why would he need to fight him again? I love the idea of Alex Volkanovski moving up to lightweight. I mean, what a wrench he would throw into that already interesting division. To me, that's exciting because I like new, fresh looks. I guess that's what it comes down to for me. I'm not saying I wouldn't love watching that trilogy. I would, but him up at lightweight edges out that third fight with Max in my mind.
I'd be fascinated to see him at lightweight, honestly, like to see how he would do, because he cuts a lot of weight and he sits on a crazy diet to be at featherweight. And we know the power and the chin and the speed that he has. And I just wonder what that would look like. Obviously, one of the smaller lightweights, but it would be fascinating to see him have that opportunity. So we'll see what happens there. Got to talk about Sterling, man. I can't believe it. Aljo having another crazy moment in that octagon, but this time for all the right reasons and having a historic moment at that. Ray Longo, how could you not love that guy cornering his fighters? That guy's an absolute legend. But when you watch that fight at the very end, how did you score it, Laura? Did you have Aljo up, or did you think Yan had it? Which rounds did you think were the winners for Sterling?
I did have Aljo up. Obviously, that first round was the one that was in question, and I have to go back and watch it again to remember how I was feeling after it. I don't always do a great job of scoring these as I'm working the fights, but obviously 2 and 3 very, very much in Sterling's favor. I mean, you could make an argument that, was it 2 that was even more dominant than 3? I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
Well, Yan said that he beliees he won the second.
That must have been, yeah.
I was like, I think
it was
mixed up there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. There's an argument to be made, especially in this world where we're supposed to be giving out more 10-8 rounds, that could have been a 10-8 round. So, yeah, I definitely feel like 2 and 3, obviously, Aljamain Sterling. I think Sterling did do enough to get round 1. And then 3 and 4, Yan came back and put him in some spots, but never in nearly as much dominant control as Sterling was to Yan in rounds 3 and 4. And I know that we don't ever score the fight as a whole, but looking back on it as a whole, Aljamain Sterling won that fight.
And just as we let you go, what an insane upset, right, Laura? Like, I don't know about you, but like, I personally was kind of all aboard the Petr Yan train. I thought he was going to be like not Habib, but like a guy who was just going to dominate for a long time, sit at the top or close to that pound for pound list. Maybe not immediately appreciated like some of the champs who have the highlight reel finishes, but I just thought he was just a guy who would get it done time and time again. Almost like, maybe Jose Aldo, who just, reigned the featherweight division for so long. And here's Aljamain Sterling, the guy who was at times the point of ridicule for so long that you didn't really win that belt, you didn't earn it, and Yan's going to smash you. And now for him to come in, adapt, the neck clearly was really injured. And even like some of the positions that it was in, me and my friends were like, man, that titanium disc in his neck must be working overtime right now. Just what an insane amount of validation to win the belt and do it the right way.
Validation is the word. And here's what struck me as I was watching this fight. So often when fighters after a fight say, oh, I had an injury, or oh, I didn't eat right, or whatever it is, all of us immediately like, oh, excuses. And even they say it. They say, I don't want to make excuses, but it's like they feel bad presenting the truth to us as fans and to the media. The fact is that sometimes excuses are real things. It's a real thing that Aljamain Sterling was dealing with, a very severely compromised neck for a long time. And then I honestly think the even bigger factor was how poorly he was managing his nutrition coming into that previous fight. You cannot fight the way that he was dieting. And tonight, to me, was clear evidence of that, because here's the thing. Petr Yan has the power to be able to pressure an opponent with his presence alone, because the threat of him throwing a big shot is so great that everyone respects it. And the fact is that Aljamain Sterling does not have that. So he has to pressure with volume. He's got to be throwing a lot of stuff out against guys, putting everything out there, kicks, punches. He has to be so busy to be able to exert pressure against his opponent that he has to have the gas to be able to back it up. And for Aljamain Sterling, he didn't have a ton of obvious paths to victory because he doesn't have the power and isn't able to put Yan on the back foot the way that Yan is able to do to him. He had to do basically the one thing he was able to do, which was find that single leg. And I really believe, we were talking about this in the back, I really do believe that Aljamain Sterling and his camp saw the way that Petr Yan checks and blocks kicks. And when Aljamain was throwing a kick, he checks very high. Yan almost picks up his entire leg. And that's when Aljamain was finding those single leg opportunities a lot of the time. And then running him down, Yan would turn his back. And that's when Alja would be able to take the back. And that's where he racked up the control time. So the creating, forcing those moments for Aljamain to have the fight IQ to do that, kudos to him. And I hated that he was still getting booed at the end of that. I really hated that for him.
Some strange crowd moments. Even though there were great Khamzat walkout moments, some strange kind of moments from the crowd today. Yeah,
it's disappointing. And like, I'm one of them, right? I'm an MMA fan too, but we got to be better than that. You know, I just, you can dislike the way that he acted over the last year, but you have to respect what he did there tonight. You have to, especially when you were probably, if you're the fan that's booing that victory, you're probably the same fan that was, you know, making fun of him and calling him all sorts of names for a year. And I don't know. I just think sometimes we don't think about what it's like to open up your phone every morning and have people talking shit about you and what that could do to your mentality. And then add to that, questioning whether your career is going to be over because is your neck going to be okay? I don't think people are really fully understanding the burden and the weight that Aljamain was carrying into this fight. It's why we saw him in tears on the scale, and I think it's why we saw so much emotion in him when he finally got the belt justifiably and rightfully put around his waist.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it was an incredible moment and just a crazy night. Another one in the history books. I feel like 2022 is really coming along here. And guys, make sure to follow Laura on social media at Laura_Sanko. Of course, her one-on-one series, the Quick Hits, Dana White Contender Series when she's back on commentary, UFC on ESPN. All the great stuff that she does, Laura. We appreciate you staying up with us. Another great episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.